The night smelled of luxury, polished floors, fresh orchids, and the faint sweetness of expensive perfume drifting through the entrance of the Beverly Hills Charity Gala. High-income donors stepped out of black Mercedes S-Class sedans, heels clicking sharply against the marble tiles as camera flashes painted the walkway in bright bursts of white. Inside, laughter floated under the chandelier glow. No one noticed the two small figures standing just outside the golden revolving doors. Lily, 10 years old, held her little sister Emma's trembling hand. Their faces were streaked with dust, their clothes too thin for the cold evening breeze coming down from the hills. They didn't belong here. Anyone could see that from the way guests slowed down, frowning, adjusting their Tiffany bracelets and tuxedos as if poverty itself were contagious. But Lily pulled Emma forward anyway. "We just need a little rice," she whispered, voice steady though her heart thudded painfully. "They said this is a charity event. Charity means they help people like us, right?" Emma didn't answer. Her eyes were fixed on the food tables inside, where servers walked past carrying silver trays sparkling under soft yellow lighting. Before they could step inside, a security guard blocked the doorway with a stiff arm. "Sorry, kids. This event isn't open to the public." Lily swallowed. "We're not here for the event. We just wanted to ask for some food. Anything. My mom hasn't eaten since yesterday." Guests nearby turned to stare. A woman in a shimmering gown whispered loudly enough for everyone to hear, "Who let them get this close to the entrance? This is supposed to be a high-profile fundraiser." Lily felt Emma shrink behind her. She squared her shoulders and tried again. "Please, we don't need much. Just some leftover rice." The guard shook his head, already signaling another staff member to escort them away. But before anyone could touch them, the crowd parted slightly. Just enough for one man to notice the chaos. A tall figure in a gray suit, eyes cold and distant, the kind of man used to running boardrooms and skyscraper empires. Ethan Caldwell. His gaze locked onto the two girls at the door, and something in his expression changed. And then, as he stepped closer, Lily reached into her pocket, pulling out a wrinkled envelope with his name written on it. Ethan Caldwell had spent most of his adult life avoiding nights like this. Rooms filled with polished smiles, meaningless chatter, and people pretending to care about causes they barely remembered the next morning. But as the billionaire host of the Beverly Hills Charity Gala, he had no choice but to attend. His advisors insisted it made him relatable. His PR team said it kept investors calm. None of that mattered to him. Nothing mattered much anymore. Not since the accident 10 years ago. He stood near the entrance, turning a sleek Mont Blanc pen between his fingers, a nervous habit he'd developed after his daughter Claire died. The pen had been hers, a birthday gift he'd given her just a week before the tragedy. He carried it everywhere. It was the last piece of her he still kept close. He forced himself to breathe, to stay alert, to play the cold, distant CEO everyone expected him to be. Then he heard murmurs near the entrance. Something about two dirty kids ruining the evening. He barely turned his head at first. These events always had disruptions. Protesters, petitioners, influencers trying to force a headline. But the tone of the crowd shifted, sharper, colder, judgment dripping from every word. And then Ethan saw them. Two little girls, thin as reeds, standing in front of a security guard twice their size. The older one, Lily, held a wrinkled envelope like it was some fragile treasure. The younger one, Emma, hid behind her, shivering. For a moment, Ethan forgot the ballroom, the donors, the weight of his corporate world. All he saw was the fear in Emma's eyes, fear that struck him like a punch to the chest because it was the same fear he had seen on Claire's face the day she asked him not to work late. A memory he never escaped. He stepped toward them before he even realized he was moving. His assistants called after him, confused. Guests parted, whispering. Vivian Harrington, his icy business partner, narrowed her eyes, already calculating the optics. But Ethan didn't stop. He approached the girls slowly, cautious not to scare them, and lowered his voice. "Are you two all right?" he asked. Lily lifted the envelope toward him. "It's for you, Mr. Caldwell," she said. "My mom told me. You're the only one who can understand this." Ethan froze, because the handwriting on the envelope looked painfully familiar. Sarah Dawson's apartment sat at the far edge of East Los Angeles, squeezed between a crumbling laundromat and a boarded-up liquor store. Inside, the air carried the faint smell of damp carpet and boiled potatoes, the kind of scent that never truly left, no matter how many windows stayed open. It wasn't home so much as a place where days simply passed. Lily and Emma shared a thin mattress pushed against the peeling drywall. Above their heads, a sagging shelf held a few worn items: an old Kindle Sarah found at a thrift shop, a single children's book with half the pages taped back in, and an empty Amazon box they used to store crayons. Life didn't offer them much, but Lily always tried to keep things neat for her sister. Most afternoons looked the same. Sarah rushed in after a double shift at the diner, her Toyota coughing its way into the parking lot like it was on its last breath. She tried to smile when she stepped inside, though her eyes showed more exhaustion than her words ever admitted. "How are my girls today?" she'd ask, brushing Emma's hair with gentle fingers. Lily always lied. "We're fine, Mom." But they weren't fine. The food stamps had run out early that month, and the last bag of rice was nearly empty. Sarah skipped meals constantly, pushing her plate toward the girls whenever she could. Tonight, the fridge hummed lonely and hollow. Sarah had managed only a small bowl of soup for the girls and nothing for herself. When she tucked them in, Lily saw her mother's hands shake. That was when she knew. Tomorrow they needed help. Real help. Lily had overheard someone at school mention a charity gala in Beverly Hills collecting donations for families in need. To most people, it was a glamorous event. To Lily, it sounded like a chance, maybe the only one left. She grabbed the envelope her mother guarded tightly. "Emma," she whispered, "we're going to try." And when dawn came, the two little sisters walked toward a world they had never belonged to. Vivian Harrington always made an entrance, smooth, calculated, and sharp enough to cut glass. Her silver gown shimmered under the chandelier lights as she made her way toward the entrance of the gala. A polished smile stretched across her face. She wasn't here for charity. She was here to secure her position, strengthen alliances, and remind everyone she was the power behind Ethan Caldwell's empire. But when she noticed the cluster of guests whispering near the doorway, her smile slipped. People were stepping back, giving disgusted glances towards something, or rather someone, blocking their view of the velvet entrance rug. And then she saw them. Two little girls, dirty, out of place, standing inches from the threshold of a multi-million-dollar charity event. Vivian's eyes flashed with irritation, then opportunity. "This is unacceptable," she snapped to the nearest security guard, heels tapping in sharp rhythm. "Get them away from the entrance, now! Do you have any idea how this looks? We're hosting donors from across Beverly Hills." The guard nodded nervously, already reaching for the girls, but Lily held Emma tighter, stepping back. "Please, ma'am," Lily said, lifting her chin. "We're not hurting anyone." Vivian stared at her like she was something spilled on expensive carpet. "Honey, this isn't a shelter," she said with a sweetness that stung. "And people like you can't just walk in wherever you want." A few guests murmured in agreement. One woman clutched her Cartier clutch closer, as if poverty might stain it. Another man muttered something about security failures. Emma's lower lip trembled. Lily stood firm, but her small hands shook. Vivian leaned closer, lowering her voice but sharpening every word. "You two need to leave before someone calls the police. This event is for real causes, not whatever story you're trying to push." The cruelty hit Lily harder than the cold wind outside. Her cheeks burned red. Emma's breathing grew fast and shallow. Then, unfortunately for Vivian, someone else was watching. Ethan Caldwell stepped into view, eyes dark, posture tense. Vivian froze when she saw his expression shift, because Ethan had heard every word she said, and he wasn't walking away this time. Ethan stepped past the stunned guests, the polished marble echoing faintly under his shoes. He didn't raise his voice, didn't glare, didn't accuse. He simply placed himself between Vivian and the two girls as if it were the most natural thing in the world. The crowd went silent. Even the music drifting from inside felt distant. "Lily," he said quietly, remembering the way she'd held out the envelope. "You said this was for me." Lily swallowed, her small fingers tightening around the wrinkled paper. "Yes, sir. My mom told me. She told me if things ever got really bad, I should find you." She hesitated, then added softly, "She said you'd understand." That sentence pierced deeper than anything said to him that night. Ethan reached out, slowly so he wouldn't frighten her, and Lily placed the envelope in his hand. The paper was worn, edges softened from being held too many times. Someone had taken care of it like a treasure. His name was written across the front, not typed, not scribbled, written in a handwriting he knew. His chest tightened. Vivian stepped forward, irritation simmering. "Ethan, don't tell me you're entertaining this. It's obviously some emotional stunt." He lifted a hand, stopping her cold. "Not now." That alone made the crowd buzz. Ethan carefully opened the envelope. Inside was a single sheet of lined notebook paper folded 3 times, the kind children use for school assignments. He unfolded it. The first line made the room tilt slightly. "Dear Ethan, if you're reading this, then I've run out of options." The signature at the bottom, Mariah. His breath caught. The world shrank to the size of that paper. "Where did you get this?" he asked, voice rougher than he intended. "My mom," Lily whispered. "She said Mariah was someone important to you. She said this letter explains everything." Ethan felt the marble floor steadying under his feet, but his pulse raced. Memories he'd buried years ago pushed to the surface. Mariah's smile, her sudden disappearance, unanswered questions he never dared to confront. He read another line, his hands shaking. And in that moment, Ethan's face went pale, because the letter claimed a truth he had never imagined. Ethan stared at the letter as if it were something radioactive, something capable of blowing apart the life he'd spent a decade trying to stabilize. The handwriting, looped, careful, unmistakably Mariah's, dragged him backward through time. He could almost hear her voice again, soft and steady, the voice that used to calm him after brutal boardroom battles. He forced himself to read the next lines. "I didn't disappear because I wanted to. I disappeared because I had to, and I kept a secret from you, one you deserved to know." His pulse hammered. Guests around him blurred into white noise. Even Vivian's sharp stare faded away. He read on. "The night I left, I wasn't alone. I was pregnant, Ethan. I didn't know how to tell you, not after everything that happened, not after the accident that took your daughter. You were drowning in grief. You weren't ready to hear it." His knees nearly buckled. Pregnant, Mariah, 10 years ago. He lifted his eyes slowly toward Lily. She watched him with a nervous hope that twisted something deep inside his chest. No, it couldn't be. It wasn't possible. But the resemblance, Lily's chin, her determined expression, the way she protected Emma, it all slammed into him at once. He continued reading. "I named her Lily because it was the only thing that reminded me of peace back then. If someday she ever needs help, and if I'm not here, I pray she'll find her way to you." Ethan swallowed hard, throat burning. He couldn't finish the paragraph. His hands trembled too violently. Mariah had hidden a child from him, a daughter, his daughter. The letter felt heavier now, like it carried the weight of every mistake, every unanswered question of the past 10 years. He looked at Lily again, really looked this time. Her eyes were frightened but steady, waiting for him to say something, anything. Vivian stepped closer, lowering her voice. "Ethan, don't let this nonsense distract you. These kids are trying to manipulate—" He turned sharply, cutting her off with a single glare so cold she froze mid-sentence. He wasn't thinking about the gala anymore, or Vivian, or the image he'd spent years crafting. Only one thought consumed him. If the letter was true, then Lily might be his blood. Vivian Harrington had always been skilled at reading a room, and tonight she saw something she had never seen before. Ethan losing control. His hands shook, his expression cracked, and for the first time in years, he wasn't the unreachable, unbreakable billionaire who ruled boardrooms with a single sentence. He looked human, and that terrified Vivian, because a vulnerable Ethan was dangerous. A distracted Ethan could cost her everything she had been building, her influence over the board, her whispered control over investors, her plan to quietly replace him as CEO within the year. She needed to act fast. While Ethan stood frozen with the letter, Vivian stepped away from the entrance, signaling 2 people she trusted, the gala's PR coordinator and a photographer she'd strategically planted in the crowd. She didn't need to explain. They understood her look. Within seconds, cameras clicked. A billionaire kneeling in front of 2 dirty children? A letter? Rumors waiting to explode? It was the perfect setup, and Vivian intended to twist it. She returned to Ethan, voice soft but dripping with poison. "Ethan, you're making a scene. People are already talking. You need to step away from these girls before this turns into a headline." Lily flinched, and Emma grabbed her sister's sleeve. Ethan barely heard Vivian. His eyes were on the letter. Seeing her chance slip, Vivian leaned closer, lowering her voice to a whisper sharp enough to cut. "If the press gets the wrong idea, investors will panic. They'll think you've lost your stability. The board will have to respond. Are you ready for that?" He still didn't answer, so she pushed harder. "Let me handle this. I'll escort the girls out quietly. You don't need this kind of emotional trap tonight." Ethan snapped his head toward her, jaw clenched. "They're not leaving with you." It was the first time he'd spoken since opening the letter. Vivian's eyes narrowed. A dangerous spark lit inside her. If she couldn't stop the scene, she could at least weaponize it. She smiled sweetly at the whispering guests. "Everyone, please step back. Mr. Caldwell is being targeted by emotional manipulators. We'll resolve this shortly." The crowd gasped. Ethan stiffened. Lily's face broke. And Vivian, finally, felt her plan gaining momentum. But she didn't know someone had caught her whole scheme on camera and was already recording. Ethan left the gala that night without another word to anyone, not even Vivian, who tried to follow him with a string of frantic PR excuses. Thomas, his longtime assistant, hurried behind him as Ethan strode across the marble floor and out into the cool Beverly Hills night. The valet rushed to bring his car, but Ethan waved him off and instead walked toward the quieter side of the building where no cameras were waiting. He needed air, space, silence, but mostly answers. Thomas approached carefully. "Sir, do you want me to get the car?" Ethan didn't respond. He was staring at the letter again, the handwriting burning into him like a brand he couldn't escape. When he finally spoke, his voice was low. She said her name was Mariah. Thomas's expression softened. Everyone who had worked with Ethan long enough knew that name. Mariah had been the only woman he ever let pass the walls he built after his daughter died. One day, she had simply vanished, leaving him with more questions than memories. Thomas stepped closer. "Do you think the letter is real?" "That's what I intend to find out," Ethan murmured. They returned to the office tower 20 minutes later. Ethan stood before the tall windows of his 38th floor office, overlooking the Los Angeles skyline. Bright, restless, merciless, the city couldn't care less about the storm building inside him. "Pull everything you can about Mariah Lawson," Ethan ordered. "Where she lived, where she worked, any hospital records, anything." Thomas nodded and began typing on his MacBook Pro, the glow reflecting off the glass as the search unfolded. It took only minutes before he froze. "Sir, I found an address. One she used for medical visits 10 years ago." He hesitated. "It's in East LA, near where those girls live." The words punched through Ethan's chest. East LA, the struggling neighborhood, the worn-out buildings. The same area Lily and Emma had come from. He gripped the back of his leather chair, knuckles whitening. "Run a background check on Sarah Dawson," he said quietly. "If she knew Mariah, if she knew anything—" Thomas nodded again, though his eyes showed worry. Ethan turned back to the window, heart pounding. Because if the paths of Sarah and Mariah crossed, then the truth he feared most might be real. By the next morning, the fallout from the gala had already begun. Ethan barely slept. His mind replayed Lily's trembling voice, the letter, Mariah's handwriting, everything he thought he had buried. But when he stepped into the Caldwell Holdings boardroom, he discovered Vivian had moved even faster. The room was full. Suits, pressed ties, faces that smiled politely while sharpening knives underneath. Vivian sat at the head of the conference table, his seat, legs crossed, Mont Blanc-style pen in hand, pretending she belonged there. The giant screens behind her displayed headlines from overnight news outlets. Billionaire CEO confronts homeless children. Caldwell meltdown? Questionable incident at Beverly Hills gala. Investors uneasy about CEO's emotional outburst. Every eye turned to Ethan as he entered. Vivian offered a sympathetic smile so fake it made Thomas tense beside him. "Ethan, we're just discussing last night's situation. The press is confused. Investors are panicked. We need clarity." He sat slowly, jaw tight. "The situation is being exaggerated." Vivian folded her hands, voice syrupy. "Of course, but there are photographs. One showing you kneeling in front of 2 children covered in dirt, and rumors that you accepted some kind of letter. Investors are demanding an explanation." A board member cleared his throat. "We've had calls since 6 a.m. They're concerned your judgment is compromised." Compromised. The word stung, but not because of the board, because a part of him feared they were right. Vivian leaned forward, tone lowering. "Ethan, for the stability of the company, I suggest you take a temporary step back from public duties. Let me handle external communications." There it was. Her play for power. The room murmured in agreement, subtle nods forming a wave. Vivian's smile widened, victory glowing behind her eyes. Thomas shot Ethan a warning look. "Don't take the bait." But Ethan didn't respond immediately. He was thinking about Lily, about Mariah, about the truth he hadn't uncovered yet. He couldn't walk away. Not now, not when the pieces were falling into place. Vivian misread his silence as surrender. "That settles it then," she said smoothly. "I'll draft the announcement." Ethan finally stood, voice steady. "No, nothing is settled." Vivian froze, because Ethan's next move would threaten everything she thought she'd already won. Ethan didn't wait for the board meeting to end. The second he stepped out of the glass conference room, he pulled out his phone, ignoring the stream of messages from PR, investors, and, of course, Vivian. He had only one destination in mind: East Los Angeles. He drove himself, refusing the company driver. The city blurred past the windshield. Sleek Beverly Hills storefronts giving way to older buildings, cracked sidewalks and faded murals. His chest tightened with every block. This world felt far from the polished towers he ruled, but somehow closer to the truth he needed. He found the address Thomas uncovered, a tired apartment complex with rusted railings and a staircase that groaned under his weight. Children played soccer in the parking lot with a dented can. A woman carrying groceries stopped and stared. Everyone did. Men in suits didn't usually show up here. He knocked on the door. It opened halfway, and Sarah Dawson froze in the frame. Her eyes, tired, cautious, and reddened from sleepless nights, widened in shock. "Mr. Caldwell?" she whispered. Lily and Emma peeked from behind her, their faces half lit by the dim hallway bulb. Ethan removed his hands from his pockets, trying not to look intimidating. "I'm not here for trouble. I just need to talk." Sarah hesitated. Fear flickered across her face. Fear he recognized instantly. Not fear of him, but fear of losing something she loved. Finally, she stepped aside. "Come in." The apartment was even smaller than he imagined. A thin mattress in the corner, mismatched kitchen chairs, a shelf made from stacked Amazon boxes. Emma played nervously with the sleeve of her dress while Lily stood straighter, protective as ever. Ethan sat carefully, the chair wobbling beneath him. "I read the letter," he said. "Mariah, was she here? Did you know her?" Sarah exhaled shakily, bracing herself. "Mariah was my best friend, more like a sister, and when things got dangerous for her, she came to me. She stayed here for a while." Ethan's heart pounded. "Dangerous because of what?" Sarah looked at him with a mixture of pain and apology. "Because of you, Mr. Caldwell. Because of what she knew." Ethan's breath stalled. And then Sarah revealed a truth that made everything inside him shift violently. Sarah's hands trembled as she sat across from Ethan, twisting a frayed dish towel between her fingers. The apartment felt even smaller now, its thin walls closing in around the truth she had carried for years. "She was scared," Sarah said quietly. "Not of you, never of you, but of the people around you. People who didn't want her anywhere near your life after the accident." Ethan frowned. "What people?" Sarah hesitated. "Your circle, your company." "Someone told her that if she tried to tell you about the pregnancy, they'd make her disappear. They said you were unstable. They said you'd blame her for everything." His jaw clenched. "Who said that?" But before she could answer, there was a loud knock on the door. Hard, impatient, nothing like the gentle tap Ethan had used earlier. Sarah flinched. The girls jerked back, startled. "Ignore it," Sarah whispered, eyes filling with panic. "They've been coming all morning." "Who?" Ethan demanded. She swallowed. "People Vivian sent. They said I'm exploiting you. They took pictures of the building, of my children. They said if I don't stay quiet, they'll call social services." Emma whimpered, and Lily wrapped an arm around her sister. glaring at the door like she'd fight anyone who came through it. Ethan's blood ran ice cold. Vivian, of course. She was covering her tracks, striking first before truth could reach him. The knock grew louder, this time a fist pounding. "Mrs. Dawson," a man's voice barked. "We need to speak with you. Now." Sarah's voice cracked. "They're trying to paint me as unfit. They want my kids taken away. All because Mariah trusted me with the truth." Anger surged through Ethan. Hot, sharp, uncontrollable. He stood and moved toward the door, but Sarah grabbed his wrist. "Don't. They'll twist anything you say or do." He paused, breathing hard. Sarah looked at him, eyes pleading. "Mariah told me that if anything happened to her, I should keep Lily safe no matter what. But now they're coming after her, after both my girls." Another pounding on the door. Lily's voice shook as she whispered, "Mom, what do we do?" Ethan turned toward them, chest tight. And in that moment, he realized the fight was no longer about a letter. Someone was trying to erase the truth entirely. The pounding on the door didn't stop. It grew sharper, more insistent, each strike rattling the thin wood and making Emma bury her face into Lily's shirt. Sarah stood frozen, torn between terror and defiance. Ethan could see her pulse racing at her throat, her breath shaking out in shallow bursts. "Mrs. Dawson," the voice outside repeated, colder now. "Open the door. We've received reports of unsafe living conditions. If you refuse to cooperate, we'll escalate this." Emma sobbed softly. Lily held her close, whispering, "It's okay. I've got you," even though her own voice trembled. Ethan had heard enough. He stepped between the girls and the door, every line of his body hardening with a resolve he hadn't felt in years. "Sarah," he said quietly, "they can't take your children. Not while I'm standing here." Sarah shook her head. "You don't understand how fast this can spiral. They don't need proof, just suspicion. One report, one photo, and we'll spend months fighting to get the girls back." She pressed a hand to her forehead. "Vivian knows exactly what she's doing." Ethan looked around the apartment, cramped, worn, but clean. Toys stacked neatly in a corner, a small pot on the stove that still held warmth. Despite her struggles, Sarah had held everything together with sheer will. That anyone would call this unsafe was a calculated lie, another weapon. And Ethan finally saw just how far Vivian would go. The pounding resumed, harder this time. "Last warning, Mrs. Dawson!" Sarah flinched toward her daughters. "No," Ethan said. His voice dropped into the tone that once silenced entire boardrooms. "I'll handle this." He strode to the door before Sarah could protest. He cracked it open just enough to look the two men outside dead in the eyes. Men in cheap suits, not official uniforms, holding clipboards but no badges. They blinked in surprise. "Gentlemen," Ethan said, "state your credentials." The men glanced at each other. We're with—" Ethan cut them off. "You're with no one. And if you don't leave this property in the next 10 seconds, you'll be dealing with my legal team and the LAPD. The men hesitated, then backed away. But as they retreated, one muttered under his breath, "This isn't over." Ethan closed the door firmly. And in that silence after, he realized Vivian had officially turned this into war. Ethan drove straight from Sarah's apartment to the headquarters of Caldwell Holdings, fury simmering beneath every breath. He didn't speak the entire way, his jaw clenched, hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly the leather creaked. Thomas followed in the car behind him, already sensing something had snapped inside his boss. By the time Ethan stepped into the executive floor, employees scattered. They had seen that expression before. Once, years ago when Ethan found out an executive had embezzled millions. But this time, his anger felt different. Personal, deep, controlled, but burning like a fuse ready to hit the explosive. He marched directly into the boardroom. Vivian was there, surrounded by 3 board members and 2 attorneys, casually sipping a latte as if she owned the building. She didn't even look surprised. She expected him. "Ethan," she said sweetly, "we were just preparing the revised statement for the press. After your emotional misstep last night, we feel—" He slammed the letter onto the glossy table. Everyone jumped. "You sent people to threaten a mother and her children," Ethan said, voice steady but carrying a deadly calm. "Fake welfare agents, intimidation, harassment under my name." A ripple of discomfort spread across the room. Vivian blinked once, her smile tightening. "Ethan, I understand you're overwhelmed right now, but accusing me of—" "You think I'm overwhelmed?" he cut in. "You don't know the meaning of the word, but you will after today." Vivian straightened in her chair. "Be careful, Ethan. Emotional outbursts won't help your case. You disappeared from a major board meeting. You're spiraling over 2 strangers and a forged letter. The board is concerned about your mental state." A couple of board members nodded hesitantly. Ethan leaned forward. "Let me make one thing very clear. The only threat to this company is you." Vivian's eyes narrowed. "You have no proof of anything." Thomas stepped through the door at that exact moment, holding a folder. "Actually," he said, "we do." Vivian turned sharply, for the first time losing her composure. Thomas set the folder on the table. "Security footage, audio recordings, witness statements. We traced the 2 men who showed up at Sarah Dawson's door. They were hired by a PR firm you've used before, under a dummy contract." The room fell silent. Vivian's face went pale. Ethan didn't smile, didn't gloat. He simply said, "You tried to destroy a family to take my company. Now I'm taking back control." Vivian tried to recover her composure, but Ethan could see every flicker of panic beneath the surface. Her throat tightening, the twitch in her jaw, the way her fingers dug into the arm of her chair. For years, she had played a perfect game, positioning herself as the indispensable strategist, the corporate savior. But now, with Thomas's folder sitting like a ticking bomb in the middle of the table, her mask was cracking. "Anyone can fabricate documents," she said sharply. "This is a stunt, Ethan. You're trying to cover your meltdown by accusing me of something outrageous." Ethan ignored her. He turned to Thomas. "Where's the rest?" Thomas nodded and pulled a small USB drive from his jacket pocket. "This contains the financial logs of the dummy contract, emails from the PR firm, and timestamps matching the men who showed up at Sarah's apartment." One of the board members leaned forward, reading through the pages. His brows shot up. "Vivian, your signature is on the authorization order." She paled. "That's forged. It has to be." "Funny," Thomas replied, "because the firm confirmed your assistant delivered the contract in person." Vivian stood abruptly, the chair screeching against the polished floor. "This is ridiculous. You're all being manipulated. Ethan has clearly lost control." But no one jumped to support her this time. Ethan stepped closer, lowering his voice. "You tried to weaponize poverty against 2 children. You used my name to scare a mother who did nothing wrong. And you lied to the board to take control of a company you didn't build." Vivian's jaw clenched. "You think this ends here? You still haven't proved anything about that letter, or that those girls have any connection to you." Ethan didn't flinch. "Maybe not yet, but I intend to." Vivian scoffed, but her eyes darted nervously as Thomas reached into his folder again. "This came from Lily," he said, handing Ethan a small, cracked plastic box. "She said it belonged to Mariah." Ethan opened it and froze. Inside was a faded photograph. A much younger Ethan stood beside Mariah, her arm linked with his. In her other hand, she held a baby barely a few weeks old. The baby had Lily's eyes. The room spun. Vivian whispered, "That's impossible." But Ethan knew, deep inside, this photo was only the beginning of the truth he was about to uncover. The photograph trembled slightly in Ethan's hand, though he tried to steady it. The edges were worn, the colors faded, but there was no mistaking the truth staring back at him. Mariah himself, a newborn baby wrapped in a soft pink blanket, and those eyes, Lily's eyes, wide, bright, unmistakable. Vivian leaned closer, still clinging to denial. "This proves nothing. Photoshop exists. Anyone could stage a picture." Ethan cut her off. "This photo is over 10 years old, long before digital manipulation looked this real." He looked at Thomas. "Where did Lily say she found this?" "In a shoebox hidden under Sarah's bed," Thomas replied. "Mariah left it with her before disappearing." Ethan closed his eyes for a moment, remembering the way Mariah used to tuck her hair behind her ear when she was nervous. The softness in her voice, the promise she once made. "If anything ever happens, I'll leave you something true." He never knew what she meant, until now. He opened his eyes, a new determination forming. "I need a DNA test." Vivian scoffed. "Oh, please, you're going to test random children off the street just because a sentimental letter shook you?" Ethan didn't blink. "Yes." Her jaw tightened. The board won't allow it. The board doesn't control my personal life, he said, and they don't control my right to know the truth. He walked toward the door, then stopped and turned back to Thomas. Contact a private lab, one that isn't tied to this company. I want results discreetly and fast. Thomas nodded and hurried out. Vivian stepped in front of Ethan, blocking his path. Her voice dropped to a dangerous whisper. You think this will save you? If that girl really is yours, the scandal will bury us. Investors will flee, competitors will pounce. Your entire empire will collapse. Ethan stared at her with a calm he hadn't felt in years. If Lily is mine, then she was never a scandal. She was a child abandoned by circumstances I never knew about. And I won't lose another daughter. Not again. For a split second, fear flickered in Vivian's eyes. Real fear. Then she hissed, You're making the biggest mistake of your life. Ethan stepped past her. No, he said quietly. The mistake was not searching for the truth sooner. And as he left the boardroom, he didn't see Vivian reach for her phone, already planning her next move to destroy the DNA test before it could be completed. Vivian Harrington didn't waste a second. The moment Ethan left the boardroom, she ducked into her private office, slamming the door behind her. Her hands shook, not from fear, but from fury. Years of planning, positioning, and manipulation were slipping through her fingers because of 2 children and a dead woman's letter. She grabbed her phone and dialed a number she had memorized long ago. It's me, she snapped. I need a job handled immediately. A voice answered, calm and familiar. Same terms as before? Yes, this one involves intercepting a DNA test, a private lab. Find out which one Caldwell's using and make sure the results never reach him. Understood. Vivian ended the call and breathed out slowly. She couldn't let Ethan learn the truth, not if she wanted to take full control of the company. If Lily really was his daughter, everything would collapse. Sympathy would swing in his favor, investors would rally around the tragic family reunion, and she would be the villain who attacked 2 children. She paced the room, heels clicking on marble, mind racing. Meanwhile, across the city, Ethan walked into a discreet medical office, one he had used in the past for confidential health screenings. Lily sat on the chair beside him, Emma curled against her side. Sarah hovered nearby, uneasy, unsure if she was doing the right thing. A nurse approached gently. We just need a quick cheek swab, sweetheart, she told Lily. Lily looked at Ethan. Is this to see if you could be my dad? Ethan's heart clenched. It's to find the truth, he said softly, no matter what it turns out to be. Lily nodded bravely and opened her mouth for the swab. Ethan offered a reassuring smile, though inside he was barely holding himself together. While the samples were sealed into lab envelopes, Sarah whispered anxiously, Mr. Caldwell, what if this makes things worse? Vivian isn't going to stop. I know, Ethan replied. That's why we have to move faster than she does. Back in her office, Vivian received a text message. Found the lab, our contact is inside. She exhaled in relief. Perfect. But then another message followed, one she didn't expect. And someone else is asking about you. Vivian froze, because whoever was watching her had just become a threat she hadn't planned for. By the next morning, the story had exploded far beyond the gala. Every major outlet had run some twisted version of the events. Blurry photos of Ethan kneeling in front of Lily and Emma, headlines speculating about a secret family, and talking heads analyzing whether the billionaire CEO had finally cracked under pressure. But the worst part wasn't the gossip, it was the targeting. Someone had leaked Sarah's address. Reporters crowded the sidewalk outside her apartment, shouting questions, taking photos of the peeling paint and broken mailbox, as if poverty itself were scandalous. Neighbors looked on with worry. A few strangers even knocked on Sarah's door, asking if she sold her kid's story for money. Inside, the girls clung to each other. Emma cried quietly, Why are they yelling at us? We didn't do anything wrong. Lily rubbed her back, pretending to be strong. They don't know the truth, that's all. Sarah paced the tiny living room, hands trembling. This is my fault. I should have never given you that letter. I should have never taken it from Mariah in the first place. We should have stayed quiet. Ethan stood near the window, jaw tight as he watched the chaos outside. No, this isn't your fault. Someone's feeding the media. Someone who wants to destroy me. He didn't have to say the name, they all knew. Vivian. Thomas soon arrived, slipping through the back alley to avoid reporters. He looked exhausted, clutching a manila envelope. "They're spinning the story like wildfire," he said. "But that's not the worst part." He handed Ethan a tablet. On the screen was a doctored video, Vivian's doing. It showed footage of the girls near the gala gate, but edited to make it look like they were begging for money from random guests, even approaching luxury cars. Fake, all of it. "Vivian leaked this," Thomas said. "She's framing them as scammers." Sarah covered her mouth, horrified. Lily's face went pale. Ethan felt anger crack through him like lightning. She thinks she can ruin 2 children just to protect herself? Thomas hesitated. "It gets worse. The lab called me. They're delayed. Someone tried to access the DNA files." Sarah gasped. Lily's breath hitched. Emma whispered, "Are they trying to erase us?" Ethan knelt in front of her, voice steady despite the storm inside him. "No one is erasing you. I won't let them." Outside, the crowd grew louder, and Ethan knew the moment was coming when he'd have to face them all and expose the truth himself. Thomas didn't waste time. He closed the curtains, lowering the room into a dim, protective shade. The noise outside kept rising, reporters shouting questions, cameras flashing like lightning. But inside, the apartment felt impossibly still. "Ethan," Thomas said carefully, "I think you need to see this." He pulled out a second folder, thinner, older, the edges yellowed. "I got this from an internal source, someone who worked under Vivian years ago, someone who wants to stay anonymous." Ethan opened it. Inside were 2 documents. The first, a memo from a decade earlier, stamped confidential. It warned that Mariah Lawson had become a liability to the company after Ethan's daughter died, labeling her an emotional risk to the CEO's stability. The second, a signed directive, Vivian's signature, requesting surveillance on Mariah to prevent reputational damage. Sarah covered her mouth, tears filling her eyes. She was scared of that. She said people were watching her, following her. Ethan's stomach twisted. Vivian did this 10 years ago, and she's still doing it now. Thomas nodded grimly. The anonymous source said Vivian was terrified you'd discover Mariah was pregnant. If that got out, it would humanize you, not weaken you, and she didn't want that. Lily spoke softly, almost whispering. "So, she tried to hide me?" Ethan turned to her, voice thick. "She tried to hide the truth, not you." Emma crawled onto his lap, seeking safety. Ethan's hand trembled as he rested it on her back. He had once lost a daughter. The thought that someone tried to steal another from him made something cold and sharp ignite in his chest. But the worst wasn't over. Thomas pulled out a small USB drive. "There's more. I tracked down footage from outside the lab. Someone tampered with the DNA files, but I have video evidence of who it was." Ethan took the USB. His jaw locked. Vivian's assistant, the same one who delivered the dummy contracts, was seen entering the lab after hours. "He erased your test results," Thomas said. "We'll need new samples, somewhere safer." Sarah exhaled shakily. "How far will she go?" Ethan stood slowly, the decision forming inside him like steel. "She's been playing in the dark for years," he said, "but she's forgotten one thing." Lily looked up at him. "What's that?" Ethan glanced at the door, where the voices outside grew louder by the second. The truth shines brightest when someone tries to bury it. The next morning, Ethan Caldwell did something no one expected a billionaire to do. He walked straight into the chaos instead of running from it. He arrived at the Beverly Hills Hotel, where a press conference had already been scheduled by Vivian's team to clarify rumors. But Vivian had no idea he planned to take control of it. Reporters flooded the lobby, cameras aimed at the podium. The air buzzed with speculation. Is the CEO stepping down? Did he hide a secret family? Are the girls a scam? Every question dripped with judgment. Vivian stood near the microphones, immaculate in a tailored cream suit, expression polished and ready. She believed she had won. She believed Ethan was broken. Then she saw him walking toward the stage with Sarah, Lily, Emma, and Thomas at his side. Her smile vanished. The cameras erupted. Ethan stepped up to the podium, adjusting the mic. His voice carried a calm, controlled power he hadn't used in years. "I called this conference," he began, "to tell you the truth." A ripple of confusion moved through the crowd. Vivian stiffened. Ethan continued. "Last week, 2 children approached me at a charity gala. They weren't scammers. They weren't props. They were brave." He glanced at Lily and Emma. They asked for help, and they brought me a letter from someone I once cared for deeply, Mariah Lawson. Gasps whispered across the room. Vivian stepped forward. "Ethan, this isn't appropriate." He held up a hand. "You'll have your turn." Her jaw tightened. Ethan lifted a folder. "In the last few days, I discovered evidence that an executive inside my company, Vivian Harrington, interfered with Mariah's life 10 years ago, ordering surveillance and intimidation. Evidence shows she attempted the same tactics against Sarah Dawson and her children." Vivian's face drained of color. Ethan signaled Thomas, who placed the USB and documents on the table in full view of the cameras. "This includes memos, contracts, video recordings, and proof of illegal attempts to tamper with a DNA test." Reporters shouted questions. Flashes exploded like fireworks. Vivian stepped forward, shaking. "This is a setup. None of that is admissible." Ethan cut her off. "It's already been turned over to the authorities." Police officers stepped into the room at that exact moment. Vivian's breath hitched. Ethan looked out at the sea of cameras. "I lost one daughter in my lifetime. I won't allow anyone to bury the truth about another." Reporters leaned in, stunned. And with the world watching, Ethan prepared to reveal the final piece of the truth, the test that would change everything. Silence fell over the room as Ethan reached inside his jacket and pulled out a sealed white envelope. New, clean, untampered. The cameras zoomed in. Every reporter leaned forward. Vivian stared at it like it was a weapon pointed directly at her. "This," Ethan said, holding the envelope steady, "is the DNA test I had redone at a secure federal lab, outside the reach of anyone who might try to interfere again." A murmur swept through the crowd. He opened it. For a moment, the world seemed to hold its breath. Then he spoke. "The results confirm with 99.7% certainty that Lily Dawson is my biological daughter." Gasps, shouts, flashes. A dozen questions erupted at once, but Ethan continued over the chaos. 10 years ago, Mariah Lawson disappeared from my life without explanation. I believed she left by choice. I believed she abandoned me. But now I know she was pushed away, threatened by people who claimed to protect me. Vivian stepped forward, shaking, voice cracking. "This doesn't mean anything. You can't prove—" One of the officers interrupted. Miss Harrington, we have a warrant for your arrest for evidence tampering, intimidation, and conspiracy to defraud." The room exploded again as the officers moved toward her. Vivian backed away, panic finally breaking through her mask. "Ethan, don't let them do this. You need me. You'll destroy everything." Ethan looked at her with a calm that came only from truth. "The only thing getting destroyed today is your lies." She was handcuffed and escorted out, her screams echoing down the hall. Ethan turned back to the microphones, but he didn't speak to the press now. He knelt beside Lily, who stood frozen, tears filling her eyes. "I'm sorry," he said softly, "for every year I didn't know you, for everything you had to face without me." Lily threw her arms around him, clinging to him with the kind of relief that came from years of fear finally lifting. Emma joined the embrace, and Sarah wiped her tears, a mix of grief and gratitude written all over her face. Ethan stood and faced the reporters once more. "This isn't a scandal," he said. "This is a family being restored." In the days that followed, Ethan moved Sarah and the girls into a safe, sunlit apartment in Santa Monica, complete with space, stability, and a future they had never dared to imagine. He established a trust fund for the girls, arranged counseling, and set up a foundation in Mariah's name to protect vulnerable families. For the first time in a decade, Ethan felt whole, not as a CEO, not as a billionaire, but as a father. And as the sun set over the Pacific that evening, he knew the hardest chapter of his life had finally closed, and a better one had just begun. So that's how the story comes to an end. And if you're still here with us, my friend, it means something in this journey touched your heart in a real way. Maybe it was Lily's courage, or Ethan's awakening, or the reminder that the truth can survive even when people try to bury it. In life, we all face moments where we feel small, unheard, or pushed aside. Yet as Marcus Aurelius wrote, "What stands in the way becomes the way." Sometimes the pain we carry leads us exactly where we need to go. And this story reminds us that healing often begins when someone finally chooses compassion over fear, honesty over power, and love over reputation. It's a quiet nudge to check on the people we care about, to stand up when something feels wrong, and to remember that no one heals alone. If this message resonates with you, even just a little, go ahead and like this video, share it with someone who might need a reminder of their own strength, and subscribe so we can keep walking these emotional journeys together. You being here matters, and your story, just like theirs, is still unfolding.